In an era where many believed a hospital to serve black people was considered not necessary, Daniel Hale Williams strived against many obstacles to establish the foundation for black medical care to be possible. Born January 18, 1856, in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, his father was a barber and owned real estate, which allowed his family to grow up in a middle-class home. At the age of 11, after his father had passed away, Daniel was taken out of school and sent to Baltimore, Maryland to live with relatives as his mother struggled to support the family. Daniel would open up his own barber shop, having learned how to cut hair from his father growing up. However, the business would fail and he ended up working for another already established barbershop. Daniel would juggle working at the barbershop while continuing his studies. Unable to decide what area he wanted to work in, Daniel would try his hand at a number of fields, but it was not until he became an apprentice for Dr. Henry W. Palmer it would spark his fascination into medicine. Daniel studied with Palmer for 2 years, then in 1880 he entered the Chicago Medical College, which was later renamed as Northwestern University Medical School. Daniel was the only black person in the medical school, as around this time there were no training schools for black nurses and doctors. Now immersed in his medical studies, he gained clinical experience at the Southside Dispensary Mary Hospital, and he went on to graduate in 1883. He opened up his very own practice in the Southside neighborhood, a mixed area with black and white families. Daniel used his practice to teach and demonstrate anatomy at the Chicago Medical School from 1885 to 1888. Some of the physicians who he taught were black. However, none of the established hospitals in Chicago would grant licenses to black physicians. Daniel was now driven to open up his own practice, not restricted by race. Daniel organized rallies to collect donations and won over many business owners, both black and white owned, including Frederick Douglass, a prominent black activist and public speaker. As well as donations of money, there were donations of equipment and supplies, and in May 1891, Williams opened the Providence Hospital training school for nurses. He took the name Providence Hospital from the concept of "the Lord will provide." Williams had always been a very religious man. 1893 would mark the year that Williams became known as the first African American to have successfully performed heart surgery to repair an injury. On July of that year, a young man named James Cornish was admitted to the Providence Hospital with stab wounds across his chest and near to his heart. Bleeding incessantly, Williams was forced to operate. We won't go into the details of the operation, but Williams managed to control the bleeding and close the wound. To attempt such a procedure in those times had high risk, and Williams knew if it had failed, his public image and the hospital would be ruined. However, the patient walked out of the hospital a month later. This incredible feat was featured in a national newspaper article in Chicago, improving the hospital's reputation and excelling Williams' name. 1894 would see Williams move to Washington, D.C., where he was appointed the chief surgeon of Freeman's Hospital, a facility dedicated to treating formerly enslaved African Americans. In 1895, Williams helped co-found the National Medical Association, which would serve as a professional organization for black medical practitioners. Then in 1913, Williams became a charter member of the American College for Surgeons. Williams worked to create more hospitals that admitted African Americans throughout his remaining years. Daniel Hale Williams, his legacy now ingrained as one of the most prominent African American surgeons in America in the late 19th and early 20th century, never letting adversity stand in the way of advocating for equal access to medical care.